What's happening, everyone? Up next on the Second Chance podcast is Fraction. We'll hear from Nick Jain. And Nick was he's a business owner. He's the CEO of IdeaScale, which is the world's largest innovation software as a service company. So he just brings this whole different mix into what we do here at the Second Chance podcast. But his story's just rooted in setbacks. He will talk to you about his just failing forward is kind of what we use. And there's a point in here when he talks about grit. And I want to leave you with this. Steps to find grit. Find your purpose, seek long-term goals, embrace the struggle, practice discipline, learn from failure, develop mental toughness, surround yourself with resilient people to reflect on the process. So as you're listening, how to just listen in. He doesn't mention this until toward the end of the podcast. So make sure you take a second just to listen with those items in mind about you're mentioning grit. Just apply those items. All right. Find your purpose, seek long-term goals, embrace the struggle, practice discipline, learn from failure, develop mental toughness, surround yourself with resilient people, and reflect on the process or reflect on progress. Let me know what you think. Can't wait to hear from you. Thank you all for listening and tuning in. Appreciate you. All right, team, Second Chance is coming at you from all directions. This is exciting. This is today's episode is going to be probably one of the ones that ranks right up there with a lot of folks' favorites. Because in today's episode of the Second Chance podcast, we're sitting down with Nick Jain, CEO of IdeaScale, the world's largest innovation software as a service company. From growing up poor in India to grinding his way into Harvard Business School, Nick's journey is filled with highs, lows, and a relentless drive to succeed. He led companies across the industries from trucking to men's fashion, and now is an evangelist for AI. He's transforming how major organizations innovate. We're talking about failure, resilience, and why brute force might just be the secret to success. So let's dive in today. Nick, thank you. Appreciate you scheduling with me. Can't thank you enough.
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and being a guest on your show. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We'll dive right in. Folks, for everyone listening, we're guarded to about 30 minutes of time here, maybe 40 if we can get it going good. We're going to scratch the surface and I'm going to get to know Nick alongside of our listeners today. And whatever we don't get to, we're going to jump back in here at some point in time and cover. But tell me this. When we talk about second chance moments, you faced a lot of challenges and failures, from not getting into business school to launching your a hedge fund that failed. Which of these experiences do you consider your second chance, and how did it shape where you're at today?
Sure. I think the hedge fund is probably the best example of a great failure that kind of redirected my life and gave me a second chance at thinking things through. So I'd had a successful career on Wall Street, worked for one of the best known hedge funds in the industry. I came up with a really new, cool way of investing, started to raise a bit of money, started a hedge fund. The actual performance of the fund was actually pretty good. There's this platform called SumZero, which ranks investment analysts based on their ideas. I was ranked number one in the world for 12 months running out of, tens of thousands of professional investors. You think that's great, right? Like you're objectively ranked number one based on the data. I wasn't able to raise enough money to keep the fund going. And that's a big thing in when you're managing assets. You got to raise a lot of money. And either I sucked as a sales guy, I sucked at convincing people my idea, or bad luck, bad timing, whatever it was, right? Failed. Coming out of that, so that shut down right before COVID hit. And as you imagine, the entire job market sucked as COVID hitting. Not a lot of financial firms are hiring. So I have a chance at that point in my life to reassess, like, what do I want to do? What am I excited about? So I can, continue to finance. I loved it. I'm super analytical. I still, do a fair bit of investing in my personal life. Or I could say, what else is out there? And I was very fortunate. I basically got applied for a job, which for helping run a trucking company. And by the way, I'd never worked a job that was not like a a white collar, consulting, banking, investment
Right.
job. And I find myself, so I've never worked, quote unquote, a real job. Well, in high school, I used to be a carpenter, but in my adult life, I've never worked, a real job at a real company that makes things or provides services. And all of a sudden I end up co-running $100 million revenue trucking company, right?
Yeah.
And that has catapulted my career in a totally different direction where now I'm a professional CEO for a living. I help take businesses that have already been established, but are ready to go to the next stage in their growth journey, which is kind of a fundamentally different path than, I was on, let's say, as short as 6 years ago.
That's when you, like you said, you go from white collar kind of into a blue collar world. I've done something similar from public safety and business, and sometimes just learning just learning the terminology, learning how some of they talk around the office, that can be big a lift. But I wanna lean into the second chance that I think maybe that I don't want to get. I don't want this to get overlooked, because right now we're listening to Nick, this man of success in Wall Street and all these things. But coming from your background, poverty, both in India and Canada, how did those early experiences of scarcity impact your mindset, work ethic as a leader in industries where wealth and privilege dominate?
In many ways, that's a tough question, but in many ways, right? I had a typical immigrant experience, right? My folks came with the shirts on their back from India. My father worked his way up from McDonald's. Throughout my life, he was a janitor, super blue collar guy, right? Like cleans toilets for a living, speaks broken English. Very classical immigrant story. I don't want to belabor that. But I think it taught me kind of three things. Number one is to think really long term. My parents knew my parents probably had a better life in India than for the first 20 years when they immigrated to Canada. And yet they weren't thinking for their first 20 years of their life. They were thinking, okay, if we roll the clock forward 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, what's the chances does that give for our children like me, right? So number one, that immigrant mentality has taught me to think really, really long term rather than thinking about whether today's a crappy day. I may have had a crappy day today, but that doesn't change my vision or my motivation for the future. Number two is hard work, right? I think, look, I'm a smart guy, but that's not what I attribute success to. It's just brute force and grinding. I got into business school by starting a campaign of people writing into the admissions office to let this guy in. I got my jobs coming out of college by applying for hundreds of jobs. I'm in running the IdeaScale, I work 80 to 100 hours a week. I don't, I'm not one of those people who is just gifted with extraordinary intelligence or ability. I'm a normal guy who just works his butt off. And I think that comes from the upbringing where, you just learn that with scarcity, you make do with what you have. And what I have in my arsenal is I got a lot of hours and I have the energy and motivation to just go do it. And no matter how inglorious the work is, right?
Yeah, you touched on a thing I wanted to point out. Coaching business and a small business, not large scale, but coaching small business. I have to remind clients that we are to play that long game. And when they're trying to get their revenues going and things along those lines, it's very simple steps of, and I think I wanted to point that out for the folks that follow me and listen to me in the small business coaching world. It's remember, play no matter where when you're in business, you're playing it long. I mean, your folks really set you up for success with that. We touched on something. The other thing I want to bring out, and you hit it. You talked about brute force, right? Can you share a specific moment where this relentless effort paid off in your career, particularly when it seemed like things wouldn't work out?
Yeah, I'll give I'll give an example from IdeaScale. IdeaScale, look, we are the largest innovation software company, but we're still a small company in the grand scheme of things, right? I'm not Microsoft, I'm not Google, I'm not a ChatGPT yet. Maybe one day. But as a small company, that means there's a lot of inglorious tasks that need to be done, right? And you don't, just because you're the CEO, it doesn't mean you get to get out of those inglorious tasks. And it's in fact probably a bad idea not to do that stuff. So a lot of the stuff, especially for the first 6 months on this job, there was a lot of like particularly data cleanup. I'm a data oriented guy. I love numbers. I love thinking about things very analytically and quantitatively, including like fuzzy things like marketing. And for the first like 6 months, a lot of my time was just spent going through the data, whether it be our HR data or like sales data and that required a lot of like garbage cleanup, like data entry. Imagine me as the CEO of a company sitting down at like 2 a.m, like just entering in numbers to make sure I understood exactly what's going on in this business and what changes we need to make. And that was, it takes a long time for anyone who's run a business, whether you're running a one-person business or a multi-billion-dollar business. When you make changes, you don't see the impact right away, right? It takes months, and you just have to have kind of faith and belief that what you're doing is right, and you will see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? You have to have almost a religious faith that what you're doing makes sense, because you don't see the results often of your blood, sweat, and tears for, minimum weeks, but more realistically, months or years.
I own a gym, and I coach fitness directly for a while, and then in business. You touch on two things that I've emphasized is I also own a pool. Both of those, all three of those things, two things that are business and fitness, is they're like owning a pool. You can go through, if your pool gets cloudy, you can go through a bunch of chemicals in it, but you got to give it time to work. And if you don't give it time to work, if you keep adding chemicals in it, it's going to be horrible. Same thing with fitness. You got to give yourself some grace to get in shape in your business. Yeah, you touch on it, but one of the things that you've done early on with your data and your analytical side that you're really good at, but you championed the use of large language models at IdeaScale well before AI became the hype. And what convinced you that AI was the next big thing? And how do you see the future of innovation evolving at AI with it at the helm?
Sure. So I had this one crystallizing moment in early, 2022. So ChatGPT has been out for like 3-4 months. I played around with, it's a cool technology. You can chat with me. You can write full sentences. That's great. So at that point, IdeaScale did not have any social media presence, whatever, which is kind of odd for a company our size. Usually you have a social media person or somebody posting to LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. We didn't. I'm sitting in Amsterdam in a bar. My wife and I are there for work. She's getting ready for a hotel. I've got about an hour while she's getting ready and finishing up work before we go out, hang out with friends. So I'm down at the hotel lobby bar. I order a piece of pizza and order a beer. And I'm like, okay, I got an hour to kill. Let's fire up this ChatGPT thing and like try and build a social media like strategy. And within 45 minutes, by the way, I'm not great at social media. Within 45 minutes, in the time that takes my wife to like finish changing, finish up her work and come downstairs, me having a beer, with typing with one hand, I was able to create a fully fleshed social media strategy with the actual posts, images, etc. Knowing me, despite knowing nothing about social media, that then so I got this thing up and running and whatever, maybe it sucked. I don't know. Within the next few weeks, what happened was I gave our company account gained more followers, more likes than all of our competitors combined who'd been added, who had dedicated staff members. Imagine me working 45 minutes while drinking, outperforming guys who have or my competitors who may have a full-time like person working 2,000-3,000 hours a year. That was like a light bulb moment that this stuff is powerful. And immediately from that, we were like, okay, the case is proven. We are going to go all in on this in every part of the department, not to replace humans, but to dramatically augment. And then we use them in, some people loved it at IdeaScale. Some people were like, we're more skeptical. It was one of the rare occasions where I just said, you're doing this because I'm the CEO. This makes sense. And so we adopted it. Pretty much every department here uses aggressively. Everyone here is encouraged to take prompt engineering courses. Especially for new employees, that's a skill that we demand you have, because if you can't use this stuff effectively, you're far less valuable in the job market than you could imagine. Like, I don't think people will be employable in the white collar workforce if they haven't mastered these technologies going forward.
I'm right there with you. I teach it, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm a high school graduate who's not had any formal education and been hopefully not quite midlife yet, right? But I am. I'm someone that's your average user, whatever, and everything you just said, I echo every room I'm in. because I know what it does for me and how I'm able to manage it. But what along those lines, what advice do you have for that business owner or that CEO or that manager who has a team that are like, we're not, no, I don't want it. Is there that nurturing, or is there anything, steps that you did, touched on something that is very, very loud, is AI won't replace the employee, but you may be replaced by an employee that's using AI. That's the common language in every room I'm in now. Um, but do you have any strategies or anything that you use to deploy it across your staff that would help that listen?
Sure. So I'd say three things. Firstly, look, if an employee doesn't want to learn, they're probably a bad employee and they shouldn't be at your organization. Bluntly, I don't want to have any employees at IdeaScale who are not excited about being smarter, more educated, better at their jobs. Full stop. Like, if you're not a continuous learner, you do not belong at IdeaScale. You may belong somewhere else, not here. Not any company that I, Nick Jain, run. I personally spend 10 to 30 hours a month doing formal education. If I can do that with my life, then you certainly can, right? As an employee of IdeaScale. Secondly, so that's kind of a mentality thing. If you're not a continuous learner, just, don't be here. Second, in a more like positive note, is demonstrate. Most people are not stupid, right? Like when you show them the power of something, they're excited about it. When you show them like, hey, a car can go faster than a bike, they usually want to get a driver's license and do something, right? I remember I grew up in a farm town. When I finally realized, hey, I can get somewhere in 30 minutes instead of taking a 2-hour long bus, I probably want to get my driver's license in my act together and pass my driver's license test.
Yeah.
So that's number two, show them the power of these technologies. And I think most people don't even see the power of these technologies because they think, oh, it can give me cool lists and it can talk to me like a human being. No, it can like clean up data for you. Maybe you're not great at data analysis. Think and do your data analysis for you. I'm a graphic, probably one of my greatest weaknesses. I'm bad with imagery, music, etc. Like I'm not an artistic person. This stuff, but I'm great at writing words. It can convert my words into beautiful images that my mind is not capable of like imagining or creating, or that I could certainly not draw with my hand. So like it augments my greatest weaknesses or eliminates my greatest weaknesses. And then the third is provide them a course to learn, a pathway to learn. Because one of the most scary things for anybody, whether you're, senior, junior, whether you're highly educated or not, is how do you learn about something new? If you ask me to go learn about, let's say, hunting, I don't know a lot about that. So I'd be like kind of anxious about like, how do I go learn how to hunt? So as a leader, you can say, look, go take these 2 courses or whatever. So at IdeaScale, I personally took a couple prompt engineering courses. I told literally on our general Slack channel, I said, guys, this is the free course I took. If you want to take the paid version of it, I'll pay for it to you do it. It's an 8-hour course, right? And it's not technical. It is just telling you how to talk better to these bots, right? And so I kind of recommended everyone at the company did it. And that makes it really easy because they can take that first step in a highly guided way. And if they love it, they can go even beyond what I've done. I've since done like 4 or 5 courses and stuff. But look, I've given them a path to see the power of the technology, but then also in a guided way, show them how they can learn without having to struggle through it themselves. That's the great thing about the world. Like YouTube there's all these online free courses, and YouTube are powerful resources for not just AI, but almost anything you want to learn in life.
We're going to recap that and we'll go back. So we want to get trained. We want to make sure it may not come from you as the owner. For the folks that are listening, get trained. Provide your staff with free paid training. Our coaches bring folks in to help them. And then secondly is encourage them to use it. And then give them all the means to do it. And then thirdly, which the first thing that Nick said is if you can't change people, you may have to change people.
That's a very elegant quote. I'm going to borrow that.
If you can't change people, you might have to change people. I think, Ewing, I like the way you put that, and you're absolutely right, is if you have that team member that's that resistant on something, it's an underlying issue that we need to address coming from somewhere else. So, yeah, I'm spot on with you there. And for the folks that may be listening that can't watch this on video, you want to talk about a fellow that lights up when he's talking about something he's passionate about. Nick came to life during that AI conversation. The one thing, and we'll move forward. The one thing I'll tell you, you touched on it, is being on the other side of, but I have a ton of ideas in my head. I have a ton of thoughts. I have a ton of strategies. I have a ton of X, Y's, or Z's. This allows me, but here's the thing, Nick, I wouldn't be able to explain it to you because you're like, I don't understand what I'm trying to say. AI, when I sit down and just load my thoughts and my ideas into AI helps me craft the way I can talk, or it helps me create a strategy that I can implement or explain to someone to where it's explained. So there's other, yeah.
Just what you said is actually a really important sentiment that I want to emphasize, that AI can help you communicate better. And I want to give a practical example from our software. Like, every software company was adding AI. The very first thing, our software helps people communicate their ideas to their bosses or their colleagues. One of the first things we discovered was uh, a lot of people have stage fright about communicating their ideas because they may not speak great English. They may say, I'm going to sound stupid. And so before we added any fancy AI features, we just said, look, it's going to reword your stupid language into something that makes you sound smart and take away your stage fright. So you sound like that great, charismatic, at least in writer. And that was like, it sounds like such a dumb case, but stage fright about not being able to communicate effectively really prevents a lot of people from sharing their great ideas.
Yeah. You're spot on there. So hopefully we'll see that change. You've led companies in trucking, men's fashion, and now innovation software. What is the key to being adaptable across such different sectors? And what's the biggest lesson you've learned from jumping industries?
Sure. So there's some consistencies across all forms of business, right? Businesses exist. They have certain commonalities. So like one is they all have HR, finance, sales, marketing, operations, right? Second, they have a service or product that hopefully creates value for its customers. And thirdly, a business is kind of like a machine. It operates under laws on how it makes money, right? At the simplest level, profits minus cost, but you can add more stuff into it to make and every business has a quote unquote equation. Actually, not quote unquote, it's actually an equation for how does it make money. In the software business, there's an equation that's got 4 numbers in it. And all you really need to do, everything you need to do, whether you're in marketing or engineering or whatever, has to affect one of those 4 numbers in the right way. Otherwise, it's pointless, right? It's called the customer lifetime value equation in software. There's a different equation for like trucking, for whatever, right? So for me, as I've moved between industries, the commonalities are, look, I master the equation for how that business makes money, and I make sure that I take the lessons and learnings from how to run a good finance department or HR department or whatever. What has been challenging as I move across companies is obviously learning and becoming an expert about those industries. That's the first biggest challenge, right? Like when I joined trucking is priced in a very, most of the people had grown up in trucking. The other executive at the company, he'd been built, his family had built a trucking business. He'd been born and raised in that. And so learning that level of like domain knowledge is very daunting. And when I joined, the shoe company, the two co-founders of the business were sneakerheads, right? They knew about sneakers. They dressed the part. So you're learning a lot of content knowledge quickly. That's difficult. And requires you to, again, sit down and grind and learn, because you are behind the curve. No matter how smart you are, no matter how, successful you've been, you still got to learn what you're doing, right? When you hop into a new field of life, right? You move to a new city. Doesn't matter if you're the greatest, most brilliant person in the world. You still got to walk around a bunch to learn the roads and paths, right? You got to learn the accents, the local, or the people. The second thing I think that I have increasingly appreciated is that good leaders need to be more prominent than I think is my natural inclination. So my natural inclination is to kind of sit in the background and make sure that like machines are like the company is running, people are happy, and kind of let other people be the face of the company. I think I've increasingly realized that it is important for executives to be more like visually active in the company and outside the company for morale reasons. That is something that I did not appreciate early in my career. I think I was effective at operating a company, but not appreciating like, hey, I could have done a lot better if I was more prominent, more vocal, rather than kind of stepping back. I don't like to be the front of the company because I feel like it's taking credit and glory, but turns out there's a valuable function for that in motivating people and getting people excited.
Yeah. And if you don't do it, it's going to come from not everyone. You're the owner of the business or in the high level. No one is going to care as much about the business as you do, and that message has to come down. So absolutely, when you have that enthusiasm, hopefully the ice cream should melt all over everyone else. and and it gives you that effect. It raises the room. Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. Well, we was talking about your hedge fund, and what that does is it gives us that just it's a brutal failure. Especially when you're at the top of your game like you were. And I want us to speak to that person who may be struggling. How did you bounce back mentally and professionally after that collapse? Um, and then did that failure help give you that unique perspective in your role at IdeaScale?
Sure, I'll say a few things. Number one is I had a good support network. I have a wife who supported me, financially through that entrepreneurial endeavor, the failure, and that was something I knew going in that I have quote unquote a backup plan or safety net, not only financially but emotionally.
Yeah.
Number two is, the way my parents raised me, I'm not defined by my life outcomes, poor, or rich, whatever, right? Like, um, it does not affect my sense of self-worth if all my college classmates become millionaires and billionaires and I'm, homeless, that I'm still going to be happy as long as I have tried to live a good ethical life and done my best, right? Because all sorts of hurricanes can destroy your life, right? A car accident can absolutely decimate your family, and that's no fault of your own. And so I think my parents raised me to believe in myself as a person, irrespective of, my circumstances in life.
Yeah.
The third was like, look, when my fund failed, it was like, okay, this sucked. I was on this amazing trajectory on Wall Street. I'm absolutely crushing it. I've been to like all these fancy schools, and I've had, a major meaningful failure that perhaps derails my entire life, right? That was a shocking realization. And like emotionally, like that was, I guess I would describe it as, it sucked, but I knew that there was always a way out, right? And the way out might be, look, might have to go. The rest of my life might be the only job I can get is going to be a McDonald's store manager. Would I really be unhappy at it? Look, maybe I didn't achieve my full potential, but I'm going to be fine, right? Like, I'm okay with my life outcome being, I'm going to run a McDonald's store and make $12 an hour. I will live and survive off that. That's fine for me. And then finally, like practically going back to grinding, like, look, when, excuse my language, when like stuff went wrong, it was the only way out of this is I'm going to work my butt, off to get out of this because no one else is going to do that for me. No one else can do it for me. My wife, like, wonderful person, but she cannot get me out of she can't help me find a new job or start a new fund or whatever, right? Like, you got to do that for yourself. No, that ownership mentality. You are whether you're an owner of your company or owner of your own fate, you're the only one who can, ultimately change your circumstances in life as well as your mental attitude. And that was my approach, that like, I'm just going to grind my way out of this, whatever it takes.
You fail forward.
I wouldn't quite say fail forward, but like fail gracefully.
Yeah, that but it sounds like a really amazing, like it probably was. I'm like you, I don't have a good word for this, but it was probably hell going through it. And now that when you're on the backside of it, you're kind of like, really, I'm glad I got these lessons. There's tons of lessons in there. And then the other thing you were saying is you really, when you go through those failures, you really learn that you're the problem, you're the solution. And you can reverse those anytime you want to. You can be the solution and the problem. And but I think as you go through those failures and those setbacks, you really, really learn who you are, and all that drive and that brute force comes out. That takes me that all of that brute force and who you are, but it also takes me to this. You like to play poker competitive. So that's that same type of drive, but it's a game of skill and psychology. Do you see any parallels between poker and running a successful company like IdeaScale?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. So look, poker, boils down to four things. Ties in. Actually, let me back up. There's a couple things. Firstly, look, I'm a competitive person. I like, in anything in life, I like to compete. It gives me joy, right? Whether I win or lose, the act of competing is great. So poker touches that part of my brain. Second, there's a lot of math involved in poker. That's it's something I'm passionate about. That's what I studied in college. I love math for math's sake, right? And I do the crazy, beautiful mind stuff, right? So poker is really good at that. And number three, poker apply or use what requires you to understand uh, risk. Requires you to understand risk, because you may have the greatest hand in poker, even pocket aces. You're not going to win 100% of the time. People like often complain when they lose with pocket aces, but turns out pocket aces beat like a pair of threes only 80% of the time. That means 1 out of 5 times you could have done everything right, greatest hand in poker, and you're going to still lose. And what that forces you to do is manage risk and think in terms of expected value as well as managing downside risk. And that's an important skill in business, right? You like all three of those. Number one, if you think about a good CEO, he or she should be competitive. They should want themselves to win. Should want their company to win. They want to be out there and beat their competitors. I want that, right? My company's the best. I'm going to go out there and beat every other company in the market. And that's why we are number one. Number two, you want somebody who's analytical. Emotions are important, empathy is important, but you don't want a executive who is entirely leading based on emotions and gut feel. You need some analysis, right? Some substance and some math behind it, or at least I do. I don't want to. It's somebody who's responsible for my livelihood, who is running a company based on his or her feelings. And third, you want someone who has an appreciation of both expected value and risk. Right? When you make a business decision, you're ideally making what's called an ROI positive decision, return on investment. You're hopefully, if you're putting in $1, you're trying to get $1.10 or $1.20 out minimum, right? But while trying to get the $1.20, you don't want to be betting the farm to make 20 cents a profit or whatever, right? So there's that risk management, risk reward thing, and accounting for the fact that like the risk also requires you to understand that I could do everything right, and yet this could blow up in my face. How do I protect myself from, not myself, but my company, right? So when IdeaScale makes decisions, we never bet the farm. So we never wake up one day and realize we have to lay off our staff. A lot of tech companies over the last 2 years have had to have massive layoffs because they thought, oh, it's great. Everything's going to go great forever and ever and ever. But they didn't manage what happens if the world changes. That's why we, have grown and not had layoffs, despite almost every other tech company sucking over the past 2 years. It's really that's kind of very ties in well, like poker versus good business leadership ties in a lot of the same skills.
Yeah, absolutely. You touch spot on. You can hear your passion about all those things. My last question, and this one, I think as I've aged, I think it's having kids myself. It's super important, and I love for everybody's ears to perk up. But for young entrepreneurs grinding their way through setbacks and challenges, what advice would you give them about resilience and the importance of persistence?
I'll give 2 pieces of advice. Firstly, I forget whether it was West Point or one of the other military academies did a study on what predicts success most in life. And the characteristic they found wasn't IQ, wasn't like, they found it was grit, right? The word they used was grit. And I think it was West Point, right? They ran studies on tens of thousands of cadets, highly disciplined people, but, some West Point people go become CEOs and others have troubles in life. And the most differentiating factor was grit. And grit helps you get better grades, helps you have better relationships, get a better job, be more impactful, whether in the boardroom or in a war room. And 2 things, right? Grit is a learnable skill. Number 1, right? There, you just go ask ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. How do I learn grit? So that was number 1. Grit matters more so than intelligence, right? Doesn't matter if you were born with 190 IQ. Grit actually matters a lot. Second, it's learnable. You can go learn the steps for grit from ChatGPT. Again, this is not me. This is a study of tens of thousands of the best cadets at our nation's military academy. The second is, don't credit yourself too much with either your failures or successes, right? When you succeed, a lot of other people's effort and a lot of random chance went into your success. A lot of who becomes a billionaire is they were at the right place at the right time. Is Jeff Bezos smart? Yes. Were there a lot of other smart people around like Jeff Bezos trying to do the same thing in the early 90s? Yes. Right? A lot of Princeton, I think Jeff is a Princeton graduate, but there are a lot of Harvard guys, MIT guys, and Stanford people trying to do the same thing. One person gets lucky. So you shouldn't attribute all of your success to yourself, but also the opposite of that is true for your question about resilience. When stuff goes wrong, you may have done everything right. So don't blame yourself when, stuff goes wrong or you fail or you have a car crash or whatever. It isn't your fault fully, right? Obviously, now, if you were doing stupid things, it's certainly your fault and you learned from that, hopefully, as an adult. But have the humility to know success is not 100% yours or due to you. And the converse of that, failure is also not your fault, or not, at least not entirely your fault, including dramatic failure.
Coaching working with my kids, celebrate your wins, learn from your losses. I do the same thing when I'm preaching in business. Celebrate your wins, learn from your losses, but don't spend no more than an hour or so on either one.
I like that. I like that third point.
Just move, right. Just put it behind you and move on. And then in kids athletics I got a 12 and 15-year-old. I always do either one of them with ice creams. Makes it better. Nick, tell me, how can folks connect with you? How can we connect with you?
Sure. So 2 ways. Number one, if at all you're interested in innovation management software, our website is IdeaScale.com. Our software is completely free for organizations less than 100 people. So whether you're an entrepreneur, you're just a random person with a Gmail address, or you are, a small organization, our software is completely free. It is the best innovation idea management software on the planet. Obviously, if you're a larger organization, I would love if you become my customer. Again, IdeaScale.com, go talk to sales. That's not me. And then if you want to get in touch with me personally for any reason, the best way to do so is via LinkedIn. My name is Nick Jain, and I'm almost always the first search result on LinkedIn. I respond to 100% of messages, so would be glad to field or answer any questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll make sure that we put all that in share notes, link to you, and then we'll get this episode out. Man, I tell you, if you haven't, if you're listening to this now and you're like, no matter where you are, if you're not experienced that failure, it's coming. We're all going to have them. And if you're in the middle of it, listen to Nick's going. And if you're wherever you end up at, this is a great episode to bookmark, because this conversation helped. This is the when you're down on the luck, go back and listen to Nick and listen to just these little nuggets that he's given all of us to help kind of kick us in the butt, get us back going, get us moving. Then embrace the technologies that are available, and then I think probably the biggest thing for the small businesses out there that are just looking at innovation and looking for a good product. Nick's already said that his software is free to a certain level, so we want to make sure that we connect those folks with you. But I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today, just to help us all get to meet you and learn more about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I genuinely appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.